Soon I'm going to replace that fucking yellow light bulb so I stop looking like a Simpson. Soon. I am part of the small category of people that have to remind themselves that a quarter of a year is not 4 months, it's 3 months. So we've already done the first quarter of this year. I know. And I've got some statistics because I like tracking my reading quite a lot. There are going to be 5 parts to this video. I'm going to chapter them so you can skip to the ones that you are more interested in, because not everyone is going to want to look at graphs and graphics and things like that, and there may be other bits that you're more interested in. I don't know. You're the watcher. You make a decision. It's your choice. The chapters are there for you. First one is going to be numbers, totals, graphs, acquisitions. We're going to look at the proper statistics of my reading for the last 3 months, so January, February, March. Second part is going to be looking at books that I have bought, my budget goal that I set at the beginning of the year, and sort of the money aspects of what I've spent. Section 3 is going to be talking about my series. It'll be a little series update. I set myself some series goals at the beginning of the year, of which series I definitely wanted to finish this year, and we're just going to do a little update there. Number 4 is just going to be my top recommendations from the last 3 months. I've read quite a lot of good books in the first quarter of this year, so I'm going to recommend some of those to you. And then number 5 is just takeaways, adjusting some goals, and looking at which areas I might need to refocus on, maybe. Let's talk numbers. In the first 3 months of this year, I read 48 books. This is how it was spread out. So, January starting off slow with 14 books read and 4 DNFs, and then February and March with 17 books each. That is really high. Like, compared to last year, 17 was like top end of what I was reading every month. And I think I burned myself out a little bit in February and March by reading so many books, to the point where April, when I'm currently filming this, I'm actively trying not to read that much because it was getting a bit out of hand. And most of that was because if we look at where I was reading, you can see that I discovered ARCs in February and March. I signed up to NetGalley. I was getting more books through from the Fantasy Hive, so I felt pressured to read these books that were given to me for free in exchange for a review. So I wanted to read those books and get those reviews out before the books released. I had deadlines for some books, but at the same time I was also trying to squeeze in all of my pleasure reading and trying to tackle my TBR, trying to drop my physical TBR down to a bit more like manageable size at the same time. So instead of finding a nice balance between ARC reading and pleasure reading, I just did both and burned myself out a little bit. So I am actively trying to calm that down a little bit. I'm tackling the ARCs first, and I'm trying not to take on quite so many unless I'm absolutely sure that I'm going to love them. It doesn't surprise me that Everand and my owned books are pretty sort of neck and neck for January and February, and then obviously in March I was properly trying to get down those NetGalley reads, so I was ploughing through the ARCs. So Everand dropped a little bit because obviously if they're ARCs, they're not going to be on audiobook, are they? Which brings us into formats as to how I read my books. Audiobook and physical are pretty much on par with each other, and then ebook not so much. I mostly read ARCs in ebook form, or I've had 2 or 3 that have been audiobook ARCs, which I didn't know was a thing, which is cool, which I enjoyed. I've spoken about some of those before, so I'm not particularly surprised by the formatting. I really enjoy listening to audiobook. That's how I read so many books, is because I've constantly got an audiobook on the go. In the last 3 days, I've listened to 3 books because they were all very short and they were audiobooks, and I played a lot of Stardew Valley, so I listened to them at the same time. If we want to have a look at ratings for January, February, March, this is what that looks like. I haven't got a lot to say about this. It seems about average. Like, it does make me chuckle that I've got 4 DNFs every month. That has changed this month, but it does make me a bit sad that my 5 stars have gone from 7 down to 5, down to 2. And I think I really felt that. I think that was one of the things that led me to my little burnout, was just I wasn't reading enough 5 stars to keep me engaging. I got really slumpy towards the end of March. I had a lot of DNFs, and like 3 2-star reads is not amazing. These are my average ratings for the 3 months. So you can see that there was a bit of a high in February and it dropped right back down again to 3.05 in March. That is my slump screaming at me. I know about it. I'm addressing it. March was not a great reading month for me. I really, really didn't love March. It was really disappointing. So I'm turning that around. And then finally the page breakdown. So how long were these books that I was reading? I would say, off the top of my head, that I really like books in the second category. So between 200 and 350 pages. Like, to me, that's a good size book. That is what I would lean towards. I am pleased if I pick up a book and go, oh, it's less than 350 pages. Like, that's fantastic. Love it. It really surprises me that only in February was that my most popular length. Because in February and March, I jumped straight up to the next category, which is 350 to 500 pages. And I read 10 of those in March. I've been reading a lot of long books, which I've been making up for in April because I can't keep reading huge chunky tomes because I lose some of that resilience that you need to get through those. If I don't finish a book within a certain amount of time, I get really bored and I get really disinterested, and the likelihood of me DNFing that book increases massively. So it's not surprising to me at all that the 500 plus books has like dipped over those 3 months, but there we go. If we want to jump to genres, this is going to surprise nobody. That spike is the fantasy spike. I read a lot of fantasy. I don't track subgenres in my reading because I think that becomes a bit of a like wishy-washy area. I just track the main genres. If I think two genres fit better, I just pick one. I just pick the genre that I feel most embodies the book that I'm reading. And because fantasy is such a huge umbrella, quite often that encompasses a lot more of the books than, say, other things. I am quite pleased that mystery is creeping up. That's my next most read genre. A lot of those fantasies are going to be fantasy mysteries. There are a lot of fantasy books out there that are just mystery books, but because they are in a fantasy world, they're sold as fantasy. I really like fantasy mysteries. The Tainted Cup being the latest one that I've read. That was really good. I'm surprised by how much lit fic is on there. Like, that's tied with horror for third place. That surprises me. I didn't think I was a lit fic person. Learning things. I'm learning things about myself. In terms of other numbers, the oldest book I read was from 1952. That was The Palm Wine Drinkard by Amos Tutuola. That is a fabulous book. I would highly recommend it. And the newest book I read was The Dead Cattail Assassins by P. Jelly Clark. This was a fantastic novella. I would highly recommend looking it up when it comes out. The shortest book I read, now I have a caveat for this because technically it's a short story, but it was sold as a book, so I've listed it as a book on my stats and now it's skewing the data, was The Six Deaths of the Saint by Alex E. Harrow. This is a 29-page short story sold by Amazon as its own thing because it's only an ebook, so they don't have to worry about publishing or anything like that. If you want to discount that, which I completely understand because it's a bit of an anomaly, the next shortest book I read was The Mushroom Knight Volume 1. This was another arc that I picked up. It's a graphic novel about a mushroom knight who trots around this wood and encounters a girl who has lost her dog and things go a bit haywire. And it's very cute. The art style's lovely, but that was 112 pages. The longest book I read this quarter was A Grim and Sunken Vow by Ashley Shuttleworth. This was 640 pages, and this was a slog. I was disappointed by this book, so getting through it was a giant pain in the arse. It's the third book in the series, so I won't spoil anything. But there was a natural slump in the series, and it suffered. And I didn't enjoy it, and I resent that that is the longest book that I read this quarter. Hey ho. And then my average rating for the whole quarter is 3.14 stars, which is quite low. So we're gonna see if we can aim a little bit higher this quarter. Yeah, I'm not super pleased with that. We're gonna move on now to the books that I have bought. I set myself a goal at the beginning of this year that I was only gonna spend £250 on books all year. I blew that in 3 months. So we can just throw that goal out of the window. I am not trying to restrict my book buying habits anymore, and that brings me more joy, and it's not doing too much damage to my bank account. So I think that's okay, and I won't hear any other argument. So we're just throwing that budget out of the window because it was a number I plucked out of nearly thin air. It was going to be like a third of what I spent on books last year because I spent about 700 books. No, I spent about £700 on books last year. I have been trying to be more conscientious with buying books secondhand this year. So I've been getting them from charity shops, I've been getting them from Vinted, but there are a number of new releases that have really cranked up the amount that I've spent on books so far in this quarter. So this quarter I spent £224.90 on books. This is how those numbers were spread out. So I was doing okay in January. I did some charity shopping. In March, I was also doing relatively okay. I did some charity shopping. You get a sneak peek at April. April hasn't finished, so that might go up. But if you've seen my book haul video, that is why that number is so high already. But February, I had a moment where I was in a really bad mood and I was walking past Waterstones about 15 minutes before it was due to shut. And I knew I wanted one book specifically. So I walked into Waterstones. And then I blacked out and I walked out with £100 worth of books, which, when most of them are new hardcovers, that's only like 4 or 5 books. I think I walked out with Harry the Ninth and Nona the Ninth because they didn't have Gideon, but those are £17 each for the paperbacks because they're from New Zealand. And I got The Dragons of Deepwood Fen and The Tainted Cup, and those are both new hardbacks. They were £25 and £22 respectively. So that hurt, but I haven't had another moment like that in a minute. I have been a little bit more controlled in my book buying. Yeah, so that's not amazing. In terms of number of books, this is a screenshot of all the books that I bought in January, February, March, and you can see that last column there is have I read them yet? I am doing quite well at reading new purchases. That's not necessarily something I pay huge amounts of attention to because I'm very good at getting my TBR down to 0 at least once a year. So I'm not too worried about that. But I do like to see where I am focusing most of my reading. So I'm trying to read the ones that I bought first. I'm trying to read the ones that I didn't necessarily purchase this year because I still got ones that I purchased last year that I'm trying to get through. But I've read most of the ones that I bought in January, February, March. And part of that is because I am trying not to buy books unless I have already read them. So I'm treating it a bit like having a trophy rather than, oh, that looks like a nice book, I'll pick that up. I'm trying to only buy new books specifically if I have read the audiobook or borrowed it from the library or borrowed it from a friend and I know I like it and I know I want a copy for myself, then I will go out and buy a copy of that book. Sometimes with new releases, I just want the new release, so I'll buy the new release. And those are the ones that I haven't quite gotten to yet. And then other times I know I need them for video ideas that I have planned, so I buy them in advance because often that is the quickest way of getting them. I'm okay with where I'm at. I had a bit of a blip when I realised how much money I had spent in February, but I'm okay. I've worked past that now. I'm in a good place. So we're gonna move on. The next chunk of this video is gonna be my series update. Let's talk about my series tracker. This is what my series tracker looks like. I initially started tracking my reading on Notion this year and decided I hated it. It looks prettier than Excel, like I will give it that, but it doesn't give me graphs, it doesn't give me like all the functions I want, and I know how to work Excel. I'm not going to start faffing about with new things, so I've moved everything back onto Excel, and this is my favourite way to track the series that I am reading. So the series that I wanted to focus on this year, the Belladonna series, which I have DNF'd. I sort of enjoyed the first one and didn't love the second one, didn't love the weird romance stuff that it was setting itself up to be, so I DNF'd that. I am up to date with the Thursday Murder Club and God Killer, so the books aren't out yet, so I can't finish that. I'm counting that as a win. I've read Sunbringer, it was amazing. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 that I had left in the Thursday Murder Club, but they were all fantastic. Highly recommend both those series. I also finished the Silver Under Nightfall duology because I got an arc of Court of Wanderers, which was fabulous. I loved it. So that duology is finished. The Anatomy duology by Dana Schwartz, I also finished that. It's not at all surprising to me that it's the duologies that I managed to get finished. But I will take the wins because dopamine is important. Anatomy duology is really good. It's historical fiction with like an element of like vaguely Frankenstein-y fantasy. If you liked, oh my god, what's it called? If you liked The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, I think you will like this. It says Anatomy a love story, and I think it's Immortality a love story is the second one. The love is not really the main part of the story, which I enjoyed. The science and the medicine is the main part of the story, and like Hazel's gumption, really. It's about her trying to be a doctor and a surgeon and succeeding, and then the romance comes seconds, which is how I like it in my books. So I enjoyed that one. And then I read Bookshops and Bone Dust, finishing off the Legends and Lattes series. As far as I'm aware, there are no more books coming up in that series, so I'm counting those as wins. The 3 series I'm still working on are the Falconer series. I just haven't even looked at getting the 2nd or 3rd one, so I'm working on that. These Witches Don't Burn by Elizabeth Sterling. This is only a duology. I have the 2nd book sitting right there on my cart. Like, I look at it every day and I don't pick it up and finish that series. So I'm 1 book away from that. That's not going to be difficult. And I'm working through the Diviners series by Libba Bray. I am now 2 books deep out of the 4, thanks to a read along going on Leanne from Literary Diversion's Patreon. So that was good. That was a nice tie-in. I'm working on those, and I'm actually very pleased at how many of those series I am up to date with, and like that's great. I'm working on it. I have been a bit harsher with DNFing series recently, and that has brought me joy because I read a lot of sequels this month, and the sequels were not living up to the first book. They were not taking the series in the directions that I wanted the series to go in, so I took a lot of joy in being able to say, actually no, I'm done with that series, we're just going to DNF the whole lot. The one that really fucked me off was the Anita Blake ones, because that just went more and more into erotica, and that's not why I wanted to read those books. Like, I wanted the Monster of the Week murder mysteries, which were fantastic, but then she started this nonsense on the side with a vampire and a werewolf, and I wasn't into it because she was making stupid choices, she was being forced into stupid corners, and I got really pissed off and dropped it. Other than that, quite happy with where we're at in that situation. I think the way I've decided I'm going to do it is keep the DNFs on my tracker until the end of the year, and then at the end of the year I'll clear them all off and we'll just see where I am in the ongoing series, and I'll clear off finished ones as well. But at least that way I have a record of which ones I finished and which ones I've actually DNF'd, which is nice. Whoa. Okay, section 4, recommendations. I'm going to start these recommendations off by telling you to read the Locked Tomb series. Please, 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 please go and read the Locked Tomb series. If you like sci-fi, if you like lesbians, if you like necromancers, if you like irreverent gore and depictions of bodily functions, if you like insanely complicated plots and clever characters and hugely well fleshed out world building and humour and satire and comedy, all of that, if you like that, please read Gideon the Ninth. Please do it. Please ignore the fact that we don't have a release date for the 4th book yet. Just take your time with the first 3, and then maybe you'll be in a better place than the place that we have all been suffering in, waiting for Electo. That is my first recommendation to you all. My second recommendation is actually 2. It's my 2 favourite arcs that I've read so far this year. The first one is Fog and Fireflies by T.H. Lennon. This feels like a Ghibli film. Imagine if you lived in a village surrounded by shadows and the shadows could kill adults. So the children are in charge of protecting the village, and they do the patrols and they run things and they keep watch. And then think about how that would affect the dynamic of the village. And then insert a visit from the caravanners that move from Shadow Curse Village to Shadow Curse Village, and then throw a big spanner in the works, and our main character falls off the walls and has to face the shadows and the weird and wonderful creatures that live in it. It's a fucking fantastic book. Please, please, please go and have a look at it. I loved this arc so, so much. It came out 11th of April, so please, 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 please give it a go. It's so good. I loved it so much. The second one, which I saw in Waterstones yesterday, it was a really nice feeling, was Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Wiswell. I got to not only review an art copy of this, but I got to interview the author about the book and how he wrote it and how he felt about writing it and the themes that he included. This is about Shasheshan, who is a shapeshifter in the sense that she is an amorphous blob that likes to hide in this abandoned manor, and she can shift her body, absorbing bits of metal or chain or sticks and twigs to form a skeleton to make her look like whatever she wants. It's got the weird, disgusting anatomical side of science that the Locked Tomb series has, as well as the irreverence. But it's also got that sort of the cozy fantasy D&D setting vibe that things like Legends and Lattes has. It is a romance. It is a sapphic romance, and it's kind of a monster romance, but it's not. It's so much more than that. Monster hunters come and invade this manor where Sheshetin is sleeping, and shit hits the fan, and she meets a lovely woman whose name I have temporarily forgotten, and they have to work out how to get rid of these hunters and get the manor back. I loved it. Those are the books that I would absolutely recommend to you from the first 3 months of my reading. So lastly, takeaways, goal adjustments. I mean, we're chucking the book buying goal out of the window. I think we're just gonna let me do whatever the fuck I want with that. That's fine. I think I am overdoing it on the arcs, but I'm aware of that and I'm adjusting it. Once I have finished all the arcs that are currently on my plate, I am going to try and do it one at a time. After that, I think that is a healthier way of doing it, because otherwise I'm just trying to force so many books down my throat. It's not fun anymore. So that's the main thing I'm going to do. I bloody love an audiobook, so I have expanded the places where I listen. I listen on Spotify. I use the 15 hours of audiobook listening time that you get on Spotify Premium. I subscribe to Everand, so you get a rotating selection of audiobooks on there, some new releases, some not so well-known books. There is a limit to how many newer books you can listen to, but I have only hit that once when I read about 7 Shauna Maguire novellas in about a month, so that's the only time I've ever hit that reading limit. I use BorrowBox, which is connected to my library. So I get some books on there, which is helpful. You can get ebooks and audiobooks and like podcasts and magazines and things. And then I do have an Audible account, because there are some books that I know I will only consume via audio and are quite difficult to get hold of, so I get them on there. That is all the places that I listen to audiobooks, and I pay for 3 of them. And I think that's fine, because I'm reading 6 to 9 audiobooks a month, if not more than that, especially if they're short. So I think that's a good investment in my reading. In terms of refocusing, I think I should be able to smash out the last of those series in the next quarter. The next quarter will also nearly bring us up to my birthday, which is at the end of July. And that is when I want to finish my TBR, my physical TBR. I want to clear it by my birthday, because then I can go on another book buying spree and just buy loads more books. But I want to get my TBR down to like the dregs at the very least before July 31st, which is when my birthday is. Other than that, I think I'm doing okay. I'm definitely reading a lot more than I was last year. I'd be interested to see if I manage to keep that up for the whole year. My reading goal for the whole year is 128 books, and I think I'm currently at 60 something, so I'm like 16 books ahead. Also, Storygraph tells me. Let me double check. Oh, okay. I'm 22 books ahead of my reading goal on Storygraph, which is fine. Like I'm finding that quite impressive, I'm not gonna lie. The only downside to that is that I only drew 128 books in my bookshelf, in my book journal. So I'm gonna have to do another page when I read more than that. But that's good. Okay, we'll leave that there. I've got a lot of graphics to make now and hopefully they look okay. Do you track your reading? Do you do in-depth statistic things like I have done? Are you this insane about your reading? Let me know. Let me know what your favourite books of the last quarter were as well. Have you read any of the ones that I recommended? Will you read any of the ones that I recommended? I'm interested to know. That's it from me. See you next Sunday.